tracks. Can't have F1 without them. Well, I guess in theory you could take a car park and paint it blue, but tracks. In 2023, F1 will visit 24 of them, but as you may have guessed, not all tracks are created equally. Some have lots of overtakes, some not so much. Some have beautiful scenery, some not so much. Some have flowing curves that make their way up and down the local hillsides, and some have blue paint. Quite a lot of them have blue paint actually. Stop! There's lots of different ways you can compare all the tracks on the F1 calendar, but today we're going to be ranking them all based on difficulty. Which tracks are a walk in the park, and which ones are the sleepless nights causing, safety car deploying, teammates separating monsters of the grid. I've made a big list and we're gonna put them on there. You've seen videos like this, you know how it works. Difficulty here refers to a few different things. Obviously there's a difficulty of just making it around a lap, but also there's a difficulty of making it around a lap quickly. We're looking at overall technicality of the tracks, likelihood of crashes during the race, and also just how goddamn hard it is to set a pole lap around each of these places. We're going to go through the 2023 calendar. Sorry, Paul Ricard, Portimao, Istanbul, you didn't make the cut. And we're going to do it in season order. We're going to be sorting all of these tracks into 4 categories. The easiest one, Mario Kart. Not like Rainbow Road Mario Kart, more like Baby Park Mario Kart. These ones are easy. Then we have C3 tires. Not too hard, not too soft, just kind of in the middle. Then we have, in the words of George Russell, crikey. I don't know why he got that accent. Crikey. What? Crikey. I'm struggling to sound British today. And then, at the top of the list, we have the They Race Me So Hard. These are the big boys, the soul destroyers, the places where the drivers earn the big bucks. These are the tracks that make the viewers at home go, yeah, nah, I didn't want to be a racing driver anyway, to be honest. We've got this big old board, well, virtually for me, of course. You can see it, but for me, it's just green. We've got this big old board. We're going to go through all the tracks and stick them somewhere on here. Let's get to it. Bahrain. I really like the Bahrain circuit, but is it hard? Famously, turns 9 and 10 are quite tricky, requiring quite a lot of steering lock while under heavy braking, which leads to quite a lot of lockups going into that corner, and also it is a rear limited track, so we do get a few spins coming out of corners and around turn 12. But other than that, it is quite an easy circuit. This place has a lot of runoff, which means if you do make a mistake, it's very, very forgiving. And for that reason, it's going in C3 tyres. It's the first one on the list, so I don't really know how that compares to everything else, but I can't really start at the top, can I? I have to go sort of in the middle. It's in C3 tyres, it's not that tough. Jeddah! Almost literally Mad Max. A silly track which I, quite frankly, am annoyed exists. It has 27 corners, but actually the line around this place is not too challenging to learn because the track goes chicane, sweeper, 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 2 things that aren't really corners at all, a hairpin, sweeper, 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 a literal death trap, another hairpin, and then you're back to the start finish line. No, the challenge here, as with many tracks, comes from the walls, and of course the
Just don't say missiles. Don't say missiles. Don't say missiles. Don't say missiles. Don't say it.
fact that you have to run a low downforce setup with so many high-speed corners. And obviously the missile. We'll put Jeddah right here at the top of crikey. Melbourne. The Australian Grand Prix is, quite literally, a walk in the park. There's obviously a chance of hitting all the walls around here, but honestly, all the corners are so forgiving that almost never happens. You're much more likely to get hit by Lance Stroll than you are to get hit by a wall around here. Since they reprofiled what used to be turns 9 and 10, there's even less to do around a lap here, and so even with the sketchy follow through that is now turns 9 and 10, this place is still a Mario Kart circuit. In you go, Shanghai. Some of F1's newer viewers may not be familiar with Shanghai, as we haven't actually been here for several years now. And quite honestly, we may still not go back. There's quite a lot of rumours, but it's on the list for now, so we're going to talk about it. Deceptively hard. That's how I'd describe this place. On the surface, it looks like quite a simple track, but then once you dig deeper into it, you realise turns 7 and 8 are actually some of the trickier flat follow-throughs on the corner, and it has 2 of these awkward variable radius snail things, one accelerating, one decelerating, which at the best of times will just hurt you on a bit of lap time if you get them wrong, and at the worst of times will absolutely shred your tyres to pieces, which will also hurt your lap time. A little tricky. in that case. But then again, the other half of the track is a 400-mile long straight, which is pretty simple to go down. So on balance, this thing is C3 tyres. Baku. There's nothing more sneakily difficult than a 90-degree corner with walls. And have you seen the Baku track? This track has everything it takes to be right up there in difficulty. It's got walls, it's got bumps, it's got this bullshit, it's got awkward high-speed sections. A track which never fails to disappoint. Will it be the first to make it into the hardest category on this list? No, it goes at the top of crikey. Miami. Miami is an interesting one. A track that is actually not as boring as lots of people thought it would be, while at the same time is still very boring. Hard one to judge. But then again, we're not judging it based on boringness, we're judging it based on difficultness. Sector 1 is a bit technical, but nothing crazy. But then Sector 2 does have this nonsense, which whilst being awful, is also quite tricky. So, a layout which is pretty technical with some walls, and then thrown on top of that a track surface which is, by all accounts, complete shit. Yeah, this place is a little tricky. It goes in crikey. Imola. Imola is an old school track. What does that mean? It means if you touch a curb, your skeleton is immediately removed from your body. It's tight. It's technical, it's got gnarly elevation changes, it has times when you have to ride the curbs for optimal lap time, and it has other times when you must not touch the curbs under any circumstances. Out of actually all of the tracks on this list, this is probably the one that I personally find the most difficult on racing sims. I don't know, I guess it's just like the overall sketchiness of it that I don't vibe with, you know, it's not for me. However, just because I find it the hardest doesn't mean it is the hardest, because as it turns out, I am not a professional racing driver. It goes somewhere in the middle of crikey. A Monaco. Really narrow, really technical. Do I really need to talk about this one much? It's like flying a hand glider through a shopping centre. Technically possible, but you're most likely just to crash it through the front of an H&M. Do they actually have H&M in Monaco? No, they don't have no H&Ms in the entire country. That is wild. Anyway, this one is no surprise, the most famous of the walled circuits, which is at times only just wider than a modern Formula 1 car. Very tricky, particularly when you have to do 79 laps around this place. Monaco is the first but not the last track that goes into They Race Me So Hard. Barcelona. Barcelona is another one that I would say is deceptively difficult. It's a track that any sim racer will be familiar with because it's in literally every game ever, but that doesn't mean that it's that easy to set a quick lap time around here. Sector 2, one of my favourite sections of any racetrack ever, is pretty tricky, and then also Sector 3 is very difficult to set a consistent lap time through. Then on top of that, remember there's some gnarly sustained G-forces going on around this place, particularly turn 3. And F1 drivers have to go around here 63 times on a Sunday. Not easy. I'm going to stick this one in crikey. Might be a little controversial, but what are you going to do about it? Montreal, also known as Melbourne 2. Montreal does have some tricky bits with the exits of turn 2 and turn 10 being a little tricky and very important to get right. And then of course we have the Wall of Champions, which is a wall that people crash into. But other than that, it's a pretty standard racetrack. It is a little tougher than Melbourne to be quick around here, so for that reason, I will bump it up into C3 tyres. Red Bull Ring. Now, on the surface, the Red Bull Ring is the simplest track on the calendar, but don't be fooled. Simple does not mean easy. There's a couple of sketchy corners, yes, but more than that, because the lap here is so short, it means you have to be absolutely perfect. Drop a tenth around here when the lap is only a minute long. That's a much bigger deal than dropping a tenth somewhere else. To get pole around here, you have to be perfect, and that's not easy. That being said, it's also not that hard. C3 tyres, there we go. Silverstone, the home of motorsport itself. In many ways, Silverstone is actually a very generic circuit with lots of very standard sort of like textbook corner layouts, but that doesn't necessarily make it easy. It has a little bit of everything, which means to be quick around here, you have to be good at everything. Being consistently quick through Maggots and Beckett's is particularly tough because you need very good condition front tyres, and then the entire rest of the lap is trying to murder your front tyres. Add on to that the Widowmaker that is Copse Corner, and of course the eternally difficult Luffield Corner, which to this day I cannot drive well. You've got yourself a challenging track rather. Oh, and also as it is the home of British motorsport and Formula 1 is a little, British, you know. It means that there's a lot of attention, media attention, and from the teams on this place, which means that every other driver on the grid is bringing their A game. You gotta be hot around here. Therefore, it goes in crikey. Budapest. If there's one word to describe Budapest, it's relentless. As soon as you exit every corner around here, you're immediately at the entry to the next one, and every single corner is some technical bullshit that requires some weird line or requires you to take some narrow strip of concrete next to the grass on exit for maximum lap time. It's hard. However, as it's not quite as punishing as some of the other tracks, it does have a little bit of runoff, and also, you know, it's not the sweat fest that is Singapore. I can't quite bring myself to put it in the very top echelon of this list, and therefore it is going to go right at the top of crikey, similar to Baku and Jeddah. It's at this point I am starting to think that maybe I should have had one more category up here. Spa, the track with the most famous hard corner on the calendar, but is the whole track hard? Yes, Spa must be absolutely brutal in an F1 car. Not one, but 3 corner complexes where the car is on the absolute physical limit of grip and where failure means you may well be flying home in a coffin. Rear limited corners, front limited corners, rain, Belgian people. There's a lot of stuff that makes this track awful. Awful in a good way. Low downforce setups around fast corners, not enough runoff. This track is infamous for a reason. It goes in race me so hard. No further questions. Zandvoort. For me, Zandvoort is like Budapest, but with banking. Again, this track is relentless. The straight is not all that long, and the entire rest of the track is corner after corner after corner. One long transition where your line has to be perfect. I'm always surprised by how few DNFs we've had here in the last couple of years, as I always expect someone just to bin it straight out the top of a banking, but then again I guess F1 drivers are, you know, pretty good drivers, which might explain that. Nonetheless, very technical circuit, which is made even more difficult when your helmet is full of orange smoke. This one goes in crikey. Monza. Bro, it's got like 4 corners. It's basically a NASCAR track, Mario Kart. Singapore. I made an entire video talking about how Singapore is the toughest race on the calendar, so it would be a little weird if I put it anywhere other than the top of the list. Hot, humid, bumpy, long, walls. Just being conscious at the end of a race here is something that probably most humans wouldn't be able to do, so being quick around here is one hell of an achievement. Suzuka! When I was researching this video, I found many people on the internet talking about how they thought Suzuka was the hardest track on the calendar. I am here to say to those people, you are wrong. I'm not saying it's easy, but in a modern F1 car really it's very similar to things like Zandvoort or Budapest, that kind of thing. Yes, 130R is scary, but then again so is Cops, or Tobacco, or Cancer, or Pouon, or Rouge. Suzuka can go right in the middle of crikey, along with all those other tracks with all those other corners. Yes, it's tough, but we're talking about Formula 1 here, it's not insane. Losail. Losail is basically Bahrain, but they made every corner enormous because actually it's a bike track. Easily one of the least interesting tracks and also one of the easiest, right down the bottom of Mario Kart for you. Colder. Great track and tough too. Basically what they did when they made this place was just steal lots of the interesting corners from lots of other places, and what that's made is quite a technical lap. Due to the width of this track, there are some places where there's multiple lines around a corner, making it not as challenging as maybe it could be. But then again, the S's around here are potentially more difficult than Maggots and Beckett's, or like the Suzuka S's. It has lots of rear limited corners, making tyre management very difficult. It has big hill, lots of things which make this track tough. I'm going to stick it in crikey, very similar to something like Silverstone. Mexico City. A track which looks interesting from a map, but actually isn't. It's got a couple of janky bits in the stadium section, but other than that, it's got a lot of very simple corners, which don't make for good racing and also are quite easy. Maybe the altitude makes it a bit hard? Is that a thing? I don't know. Anyway, it goes in C3 tyres. Interlagos. There are almost no straight bits at Interlagos, and every time you have to turn the wheel is an opportunity to lose time. Some nice elevation changes, which adds to the difficulty of lots of corners, and also the chance for very, very variable weather conditions is the reason this track catches lots of people out, and why it always used to make for such good, unpredictable title deciders. Sadly, that is not the case anymore, but it is still a great and pretty difficult track. Despite what he's doing on screen, I'm putting in C3 tyres because I changed my mind while editing. Las Vegas! Hard to say what this track will be like as it doesn't actually exist yet, but from the layout it looks like it's going to be a bit shit. It's basically going to be chicane straight, hairpin straight, chicane straight, hairpin end. Great. Hard to say if it will be tough or not, but considering Las Vegas is in the middle of the desert, it's going to be dead flat and therefore probably not all that tricky. Likely to be somewhere around C3 tyres or Mario Kart, but until we have a race here, we won't know for sure. So I'm going to stick it down here for now, and let's see what a race is like. Yas Marina! As boring as it is, Yas Marina is actually quite technical. Everything to the right hand side of this thing is where the drivers earn their money, requiring pinpoint perfect turn-in points to get maximum speed through lots of these corners. The track here in Abu Dhabi may not be much to look at, but it is actually quite challenging. And also turns 1, 2, 3, 4 are actually really good, but you can't tell anyone I said that. The other half of the circuit though is just 2 straights, which is not particularly difficult to get right. So that really brings the whole thing down a bit. I am still going to stick it right at the bottom of Crikey, only because this is the very last race in the season, and what that means is absolutely every driver and team is going balls to the wall trying to maximise their points to get the best possible standing in the championships. There is almost literally nothing to lose around here, and so everyone is going to be driving hard, and that is the whole calendar. It turns out 24 tracks. Quite a lot, actually, it's quite a lot of tracks. Obviously for this video, difficulty means different things to different people, and for racetracks, it depends on what your skill set is. Some people are good at different types of corners. It's also a case of familiarity. If you've grown up driving one track 15 times a year, then you're probably actually going to be quite good at it. But still, in general, I'm happy with this list. It shakes out kind of well. You may disagree. If you do disagree, please feel free to let me know down below. And also if you think anything else should be at the very top of this thing. I mean, it's Singapore. Singapore is the hardest one, but if you think anything else should be in the top category, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until then though, I've been Mr. V, stay safe, and I'll see you guys later.